do Agile without understanding why we need to do Agile, what is it about. So we'll start from the beginning, from zero. My name is Jakkris Weerawan. I'm with ExxonMobil IT. I've been with the company for 15 years. I've been very fortunate to see both sides of things. I have part of my teams run projects, and part of my teams run kind of a lean startup / UX. So I kind of see the flow from the beginning to the end. And Bia with me, Weerawan, is a UX researcher.
Yes, I am a Weerawan Sangshan. You can call me Beer. I am a UX researcher and designer in ExxonMobil.
Okay, so I think this is the first time for her. We're going to take turns. Her area of specialty is UX. So I will start off, and then she'll jump in when we start touching on UX. Okay. So I'm hoping for a lot of interactivity. So over the next couple of slides, when we ask you for some participation, I hope you just kind of snap and respond, okay? There's a purpose to it. So this very first few slides, we're going to ask you for something that I think you're fairly familiar with. Do you think these lines are parallel or are they curved? Parallel, right? Okay, cool. You think these are square or are they curved? Square. All right. Think these two lines are equal or are they different sizes? Okay. Do you think these are, yeah? So these are lines or squares or curve? Okay. We'll come back to this, and I think you'll see why I ran through other slides. But I think a lot of us have heard that the world today is very interconnected. There are lots of infinite possibilities, and you can literally do anything you want, get access to whatever data you want, and try to do things that you never thought of before. So if you really look at things before we think about all these possibilities, one of the key things that we tend to try to do is, there are all these things that I want to do. How fast can I do it? How agile can we do it? One of the key questions that I've often asked myself and the team is, do we know the difference between fast and agile? Why is this conference called Agile Tour and not a fast tour? Have we ever thought about a difference? Because I think there's often a misconception that, hey, we got to go quickly, right? Have we ever thought about that? I think in Thai it's kind of likeความเร็ว and ความคล่องแคล่ว, I think, right? Something like that. To give you some idea, in relation to these two words, what do you think of when you see this photo, this picture? Right? Fast, agile, fast, or speed? Yeah, cheetah. What do you think of when you see this picture? Yeah, it's a monkey. Yeah, it's a monkey. When we talk about fast and agile, I think you can't really talk about it without thinking about the one thing, the known and the unknown, the probability, the assurance of success. And when you think of this, you think of something like this, right? Gambling, rolling a dice. What happens if I try to do something new, if I try to do something fast? What are the chances of me being successful? And we all know the dice. But obviously, we don't do this in the office. In fact, we hate doing it in the office because before we start anything, the first question that we get asked is, how much certainty is there? I have a new idea. I want to implement it really fast. How can you assure me that I'm going to be successful? Right? And its scale probably come from the red dot there, where you're trying something truly new. No one has done it before. You've really got to start from scratch. And pretty much there's a lot of risk. To something that maybe somebody else has done it, you've never done it, a little bit less risky. You can probably learn from them and find out, hey, how did you do this? Were there any learnings that I can learn from you? And obviously, in the area where you've done it many, many times before, we've done this project, we've done this implementation before, we just lift and drop, right? Which is a little bit less risky. So just going back now to this infinite possibilities that we talked about earlier, essentially, they are somewhat affected by what you know and what you don't know. If you're trying something that somebody else has done, it's a little bit riskier. So a lot of times, we think we know what we know, right? And the reason I went through all of that game with you is I cheated. The line is not the same length, but because we've always associated with, I see these two lines, it's going to be the same. The rules have changed, right? The rules of the world have changed, and you guys are now suddenly thinking down. By the way, there's a protocol. I'm sorry I didn't mention it before. The little QR code, if you snap it, it will take you to the source of the material. This is actually based on the talk by Eddie Obeng, TED Talk, where he talks about this, how the world is changing very quickly, and you'll see all these QR code kind of scattered across my talk. So now you're thinking, what has this got to do with us, right? What has this got to do with us in Agile Tour? But before we go ahead, one of the things that is one of the subjects that I hated the most when I was studying is history. But now I'm going to share with you a lot of history, because I think that gives us a lot of learnings from, right? And I do have to do some company PR, so this year, Esso is with us for 125 years in Thailand. Some of you may know that. This is the first slide where we will look back at history. So from here on, I hope I'll keep you interested, because there are some facts that's happened in the past that I think we can learn from. So the first story I'm going to tell you is this little thing called the light bulb that we all know was invented by Edison in the late 1870s, right? By 1881, about 10 years later, there was a first electricity generation station in the United States. By 1900, if I were to ask you almost 30 years later, how many factories in America do you think have replaced electrical machines, instead of using steam machines? If you were to get 30 years, because before the invention of electricity, most of the factories were using steam engines in their factories. So 30 years later, how much of that has been replaced by electricity? Any guesses? 30 years. No? Is that a 0%? 30%? 10%? Okay, those good guesses. It's around 5%. 5%, 30 years. I mean, I think when you think about it, the steam engine were very bulky. Electricity bring a very much smaller and compact form. Why do you think it took them so long? It actually took about 50 years for electricity to be, completely replace steam engines. If you look back at history, there's a typical steam engine machine. You will see that there's a lot of pulleys and a lot of system of gears. Steam engines needed to be placed in certain ways because the power needs to be transmitted from the central kind of shaft. So any machines that needed a lot of power needed to be very close to the central shaft. When electricity was first introduced, what did you think the managers and the business owners do? I'm sorry? They didn't do that. You would have thought they would do that. Yeah. They just replaced it. So they put the electricity where the equivalent steam engine was, close to the source, as Zach said. So they just lift and drop. What they didn't do was rearrange the order to be more process efficient. So that's why we think it's important now. How many of us are actually doing Agile because everyone else is doing it, without really understanding, without reorganizing, and I think what Shane mentioned, the mindset, without changing the mindset that we need to think differently. We're still thinking the same way. We're still favoring efficiency. This is what I called baggage, right? I struggle to find a Thai equivalent for this term, because it's like you've got this thing, this belief that you have, that you carry with you all the time, and it's really difficult to get rid of. In the case of the factory, you've always used steam engine. You've always placed them close to the power source. So when the time comes, you don't think about anything else but just to try and replace it, right? So I think for us, 50 years, incidentally, is about the same time that a generation of managers retire. That's when you have new people coming in, and they started questioning, why are all these machines still here? The next thing that we need to touch on to just see how the world has changed is these two terms here, complicated and complex. Have you guys ever thought about if they're the same or they're different? It's kind of similar, and obviously you look at this and you have different interpretation of what it means. The term as defined by General McChrystal, who wrote the book Team of Teams, he basically defined complicated as being a sequence of processes where you can define them. You can define exactly A causes B and therefore causes C and D. Complex is a little bit more challenging, where the interdependency is all over the place. Looking at this, you may think, okay, yeah, I can kind of get, but I don't get it. So let me share with you some example. Do you think this is a complex process or a complicated process? I mean, it's going to take you a long time to go through this, but eventually you're going to get through all of them, right? It's a complicated process. And corporates are really good at complicated process. We can define 10,000 steps and we'll get all of them. So you're now thinking, okay, what is complex? This is complex. The world we live in today is complex, where we have data and we have so much data, we have no idea how they interact with each other. And now you're thinking, okay, no, surely we have a lot of data. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to share with you a couple of stories that I think is interesting. Some of you may have heard about this last week. The lottery winner, have you heard of it? So if you haven't, so this was interesting. On Monday, I hear a story on the radio and on the news feed that this lady has gone to the police because her husband has won 4 million baht of lottery, and they were supposed to share it together. And, you know, it turns out that her husband said no. On Tuesday, I hear that the husband is now sorry for what he did, and they will share the lottery together. 2 days later, on Thursday, I hear that actually the lady is not married to the guy, he's actually married to somebody else, and she is his girlfriend. All of this in the space of 4 days. So I ask you, if you were the guy or the girl, how do you stop this from happening? How do you anticipate something like this happening, and how do you stop it? Can you stop it? On a more serious note, Hong Kong. If you were the Chinese government, if you were the British government, if you were the US government, looking back in hindsight, how do you stop it? Can you stop it? Could you have stopped it? This is a complex process. Some of you may also have seen this before. Anybody recognize the sequence? There's an exponential growth, right? The first one is, I can't see it from here, so it's like 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. Some of you may have also heard the terms, you know, we have now, the world has moved from the first half of the chessboard to the second half of the chessboard. What I've shown you there is the first half of the sequence out of from 1 to 32. I struggled when I was trying to prepare this slide. It's like, what does it mean by things are now different? So I did a little bit of research, and hopefully you guys will understand it. If you don't, let me know. Just to give you some idea, Thai population, if you didn't see that, is somewhere around there, 70 million people, 69, 70 million people. That's still in the first half of the chessboard, right? US population, 327 million, still in the first half. The Chinese population is 1.386 million. Well, yeah, 1.386 million, 1.386 billion, sorry. What is in the second half of the chessboard? The human population is 7 billion, I think, it's called billion. So why is this different? So if you think about it, now, if we say we have a good idea and our target is 50% of the Thailand population, we're talking about 35 million people, right? On the flip side, if we say, hey, I have a great idea and my target is 1% of the world population, that's 70 million people. Think about it. If you go to management and you say, I have an idea and my target is 1%, it requires a different kind of thinking because these numbers are so big, we have no idea what they mean. We've never been here before. We just crossed into this threshold in 2013 when the transistors number get into this realm. And there's a book that we don't have time to go into called The Second Machine Age by Eric and Andrew there. You can take a look at it. It's quite a challenging book to read. But what he basically says is that we've now moved into an area where what we used before, the rules, the experience, are questionable. If that doesn't convince you, this is something that I got from BlackRock. The adoption of technology in the US from 1900 to today. Telephone, electricity, car, radio, fridge, TV, all the things that we all have in our homes now. Air travel, color TV, credit card, microwave, video games, PC, cell phone, internet, digital camera, MP3 player, HDTV, social media, smartphone, and tablet. You guys seeing a trend? So if you're planning, how well do you think you can react with a given adoption rate today? You plan 10 years, you think it's going to stay the same? So I think what I'm saying is there's a lot of unknowns now. We have a lot of baggage, right? The world is changing very quickly, and we're so used to ensuring. The question that we get asked typically is, how do we ensure that nothing goes wrong? So the world that we live in today, what I'm proposing is the question that we also need to ask is, something will go wrong. What are we going to do about it? In this unpredictable world. If you still think that the world today is predictable, you're going to be very challenged to try and make sure that you get 99.999%, because the 0.01% is now very different. 9.58. Does this ring any bell to any of you guys? It's an unfair question, unless you are an Usain Bolt fan, right? Usain Bolt can run 9.58 seconds for 100 meters in 9.58 seconds. Now we're going back to this fast versus agile concept. If you live in an ideal world where you assume that everything is predictable, this is the world you're looking at. You have Usain Bolt running down a very clear track, no obstacle, very clear objective. You don't need to make any adjustment, you just go for it, right? This is the world we live in, though. Do you think Usain Bolt can run 9.58 seconds here? 10 seconds? 12? This is the truth that we have to come in terms with before we start thinking why we need to be agile. Not fast, agile. Which one do you think is fast? Which one do you think is agile now between these two? Just to put into perspective, and you can tell me, let me know later if you agree with this analogy or not. Who will get to the goal the fastest? Right. So with that in mind, what I've just said is, the world is changing very quickly. There's a lot more unknowns. So how do we navigate through this? And one way of navigation is, you need to start exploring, right? And I think when you talk about exploration, to find your way, you have a clear goal, you know where you need to go, kind of move left and right to find the right way to go to the objective. Some of you may think about this, exploration, or maybe deep sea exploration, or maybe even going to the moon. What we've been doing over the past couple of years, at least within the team, is we think of exploration as very simply as there's something new and I have no idea what I need to do. How do I start? So if you think about it, I think Zach can probably relate because he's been in Thailand for like 11 months, right? You're new to a foreign country. You go into a supermarket. You have no idea which brands are which. How do you start exploring? Do you go and buy the most expensive stuff? Or do you buy the small little things? Take it home if you're married to your wife, obviously, to get her approval, the kids, and then you come and buy some more. And it's very complex because, I've been to Brazil. The first time I went there, I don't drink sparkling water at all. And you go there and the sparkling water are next to still water. One is pink and one is blue. And you have a 50-50 chance of deciding, okay, which one is still and which one is sparkling. And I chose the wrong one, To add to more complexity is if you go to Hungary, the color is reverse. So if you go into an unknown place, you got to start small. And that's why if you remember back in the beginning when you said begin again, that's our MVP, and this term will come up again, minimal viable product of our poster. When we start exploration, you can't go big, shouldn't invest a lot of money, just like you would in a supermarket. Okay? And then you got to kind of have these questions in mind. I'm exploring, what exactly am I looking for? Or in the UX term, what problems are we trying to solve? And I think with that, I'm going to reveal part of the portion. I think some of you may see this before. You start exploring, you start diving down into the problems, what problem we're trying to solve. And I think Bia will tell us, and I think about her discovery phase.
Okay. Thank you, Jakkris. Okay. Discovery phase. Sorry. Have anyone here hear about it? Did it or know it before? Yes? Yes? No? Maybe? Right? So, discovery phase is an intensive research period that usually undertaken at the very beginning of any project, right? And it's where and when you will have chance to know your user better, to ask the question, to know their problem, their challenge, their needs, and their want. So just imagine here, there are two areas. First one is where is the goal? What are they trying to achieve? Where are they trying to get to? And the other areas is what exists today, the current workaround, the existing working process. So in the middle is an opportunity for us here. But in order to fill those gaps, we will need to learn and to understand first what do they want, what they're trying to achieve, and how are they right now, right? And be able to fill those gaps, we will need some investments. And as a new digital project, it usually takes a very high investment for most of the organization. And at the same time, these projects are expected to provide back a decent financial return, right? But it's same as any other investment out there. There are risks. And as you are people here, all of us here, who is maybe part of the team or responsible for the team, for the project, we will need to reduce, we will need to minimize those risks as possible. It's the same thing as the engineer or the construction worker. They won't start to build the house without truly understanding the plan, analyze the plan first. But why? Why do they don't do it? Why we don't do it? Or even if we did, why it's often rushed and deprioritized? Is it cost too much? As this is one of the common reasons when the real value of the discovery phase is not truly understood. We don't do discovery. We are agile. But whatever you are, if you are waterfall, you are agile, you'll be able to do it. And to do it upfront is even make the agile process more efficient. In the result, you can see in the clearer user story into more detail, or even the clear understand how the end sprint ends. And next, we know exactly what we want to build. Of course, you know, especially if you are the in-house development team. You may think that someone somewhere out there might have done some discovery already. Otherwise, how are you gonna know, right, what you're going to build? Someone somewhere out there who might be just a few people from the business team who have their meeting that identify that this is our users, this is their problem, and this is what they want, who make the assumption. So this is a chance for all of us here to not even understand our user better, but also to have the clear vision, share vision together, to make use our best of our expertise and don't waste our time. So, come back to the question, do we really need it? The question is almost always yes. With such an important investment, why take the risks? One question to all of you here, what is the cost of not doing a discovery phase? So next, why should you? Then why should you do it? Jakkris already shared with you about the uncertainty, especially in the very beginning of the project, right? So discovery phase reduces uncertainty and also help you to provide the purpose and direction for your team, more clear vision, and also highlight any potential roadblocks that you might face in the future that might derail your project later on. It's all applied to 80-20% rules here. 80% of the problem out there are caused by the 20% of the causes. So for us to find and to discover those 20% as much as possible is help us to reduce the risks. It's help us to save a lot of money and time that we don't want to lose at the first place. So you know what is this already. Why? And next is how. It all starts with a question, very easy. First question to the business. What are they trying to deliver? And of course, question to your users. Who are they? What's their problem? To have a deeply understanding and learning your users, their context. Just listen to them. Have empathy for them. What's their problem? Any frustration, concern, expectation, want, needs, and challenge. So we'll be able to fill those gaps properly. I know that it's easy to talk, right, and give you a metaphor, but how is it in the reality? I want to share all of you here with my own experience as a UX researcher in ExxonMobil. When I first joined the company, it's almost 1 year ago, I joined in one of the projects, very big project. It's a global project that all the employees have to use it. So, of course, when I first joined, they already start the project almost 6 months. They already start the project. They already roll out with the Asia Pacific team, few teams in those 6 months. So it's a little bit too late, but better than never, right? So when I first joined, I have a lot of questions. There are 30 people in the team around the world. Houston, United States, Moncton, Canada. This team, the functional team, the technical team. And of course, the most importantly, I have to ask my users, what do they think? Especially the users that we already roll out. I go back to them and ask the question, those kind of questions that the project team never ask them. How are you? Do you like it? How do you feel if the tools support you? And the feedback is, me, they not really like it. They share with me that it's not even our product. It's not support them. But it's also a burden for them. Make them have to double work. I have a lot of questions and suspicion that they don't understand why they have to do it. How is value to them? It's already benefit those management level, but what about them, the users, our employees, our friends? So of course, this is a very big finding for me as a user experience. So I prepare all the report, the root cause, 1, 2, 3, and the outcome, and present to the team. And of course, they are very shocked about this. They have no idea that this is the feedback from the users. After that, I receive a lot of calls, emails, conference, meetings from the people inside and outside of the project. They ask me, is this real? Where does this come from? Who said this to you? Of course, I'm not going to tell them who said this, right? But after this, after those shouts, we as a project team, we stop development, what we are doing. And we start to look back, what have we done? And how do we compromise to have the win-win? As our employees and us as a project, we have the same goal, right? Which is our end customers, to improve the experience, to be better. So I don't know how is this story gonna end. It's gonna be a happy ending because now we're still on the way. But I am a lucky UX as my product owner and my project manager are very open-minded. They're listening to me. They're listening to their users and willing to be compromised and stop what they're doing and try to support the user better. So I want to encourage all of you here who is like me, stakeholders, maybe from technical, from business team, that you can go back to the users and ask the question. You don't need to have the UX expertise to make a question. Just ask them, and brave to share, and brave to speak out. And for the people here who is the project managers or product owner, or who is the leaders, I want you to be inspirational leaders who is create the safe environment, the trust environment, where the people in your team is free to talk, feel comfortable to talk the truth. So we enjoy the discovery together, embrace the truth together, and also prepare for the next better. And next, I'm gonna pass back to P. Jakkris ka. Thank you.
Okay, hope you guys can hear me okay. I'm just gonna lead us through as a continuation from that. Once you start discovering, some of you may have seen this chart before. It kind of links up the solution process. I kind of see the middle as very gray. Obviously there's a lot of recycling, iteration. Once you have an idea, you have a problem that you want to solve, you have different ways of trying out the solution. You try them all, and you find out a couple that maybe work and worth scaling up. You use Agile or Waterfall, whatever is your fancy, to resolve it. But Pierre already touched on some brutal truths that we need to think about. So over the past couple of months and years that we've run the team, we found there are three things that really enable the team to experiment, to find out and address new problems, the brutal truths. Empowerment is something that we've all heard about, but it's so very difficult to do. So we're going to share a little bit of a history again, and then we'll share with you some of the things that we've done in the team. Focus is one of the things that we find very helpful in trying to steer the team towards the right goal. And I think the last one is MVP, which I think we're all familiar with, the minimal viable product. So empowerment. Every organization try to say that we want to empower our folks, right? It's not a new thing. I'm going to share with you a couple of letters from the past around 1850-ish. I don't expect you to read them all. I'm just going to summarize them for you. This first one is a summary of somebody in the United States military being sent somewhere, to Japan actually. It's basically a letter that says, hey, we're sending you to Japan, do whatever you need to do. By the way, if you have some time, talk to the emperor and talk to the whoever you need to on behalf of the President of the United States. It's a very, very broad statement, right? This other letter, also the same time frame, 1850-ish as well, basically says to this person, hey, we're sending you to do this. I suggest you try and do this and that and this and that. And then if you run into trouble, talk to this guy. Otherwise, try and do this and that. It's very detailed instructions. Now I'm going to introduce you to two gentlemen. One is Captain Matthew Perry, and the other one is Major General George Meade. If I were to ask you, and I think just to give you some idea where they rank here, right? One is a captain, one is a major general. Who do you think get which letter? Which one do you think Captain Matthew Perry got? The first one, which is very broad, or the second one? The second one, right? You would have thought so, but he actually got the first letter. And the reason for that, can you guys guess why? So Meade was actually in charge of the US Army in the States, right? His area is on the left there, where, you know, the greenish area. Whereas the captain was being sent to Japan. What's missing? I mean, communications in the US at that time was, you know, you can send the post, you can do things, and the general could see exactly what was going on. So he knew this was going to happen, this was going to happen. I mean, Perry was being sent all the way across Japan. There was no way he was going to communicate back and say, oh, I found this, what do you want me to do? This was empowerment. You send somebody away and you basically said, you do whatever is needed, right? The challenge also for us as management and supervisors, a lot of times, you know, all this data being available to us, we ask people for status because we can, not because we need to. I see this guy, I'm very worried about it. You know, I see his green on the Skype, and let me ask him what's happening. How would you do that 10 years ago when we didn't have the information? How did we survive? So I think a struggle for us as management position is, you know, we talk about empowerment, and a lot of times we go and, hey, is this done? Is this done? Is this done? We need to kind of step back and isolate ourselves. Give objective, two things that we found is needed. Give objective, and you have to have trust in this environment. You have to give people very clear objective on what it is you're supposed to achieve. So that's empowerment. We're going to go a little bit deeper now in objectives. And you can't go through this without focus, right? I think the next slide, some of you will be pretty familiar with the OKR, objective key results. It's one of the buzzwords that I have a love-hate relationship with. I have a love-hate relationship with because what do you think of when you think of OKR? Fast feedback, reassessment, right? Yeah, you gotta Set a goal and then just fast feedback and find out what happens. Stretch for amazing. Yeah, we can all do it. Really stretch ourselves and see how far we can go. Right? Anything else? You guys know? I'm hoping somebody have focus. Yes. Somebody's been reading. Anything else? Alignment. These are the two things that we don't hear about. If you talk about these two things, what's the difference between OKR and KPI on steroids? The first one is actually superpower number 3 if you read John Doerr's book. Measure what matters. Number 3. Not number 1, not number 2, number 3. Stretch for amazing is superpower number 4. What he talked about, focus and commitment to priorities, impel leaders to make hard choices. Superpower number 1, which we don't hear so much about. Align and connect for teamwork. Superpower number 2, which we don't hear so much about. So generally speaking, OKR needs to be very specific, and I left this off the book. Intel's OKR. Demonstrate the 8080 superior performance compared to Motorola 6800. This is a leader's choice. Our priority right now is 8080s. If you're not working on this, it's not our priority. Do you think everybody in Intel was working on this? Yes, no, maybe. But what they can do is they look at this and they feel empowered that this is the company objective. I feel empowered to take action. But it means the leader have to be very specific. Because if you build OKR like we want to improve customer satisfaction, you can make everything fall under that umbrella. And doing everything is not a strategy. So we've tested this. We've had a fairly small team, so we changed our OKR quite a bit. And I get a lot of input for the team when we agree on what OKR should be for us. We have a little innovation team, and initially we kind of thought, hey, this innovation, right? Everybody should want this. So our OKR, and without going into the details, was we need more projects, right? I think our OKR in the beginning was like, let's get 15 to 20 projects. And then after about 2 months, we thought, why aren't we getting more projects? And then we started discussing internally, and I think the team found that we don't really understand why we're doing this. We don't understand why we need to drive more innovation, the kind of adjacent and transformational type of innovation. So we thought, okay, we're going to change our OKR now to be creative operation. It's kind of like creative friction. We need to argue among ourselves more as to why we need to be innovative. Argue internally so that we become convinced ourselves first, right? And then we shifted to other groups, the business line. We started having workshops and things like that because we wanted the business user to ask questions to us, challenge us, so that have abrasive discussions so that we become more convinced of our cause. And then we changed our OKR again once the second one was done to spread the word. So we still did abrasion, we still did projects, but those were way down on the priority list. That means if somebody comes up and say, hey, I need help to run workshops so that people know about innovation more, we drop everything else. So when you said OKR, it should be very clear and give people, the team, enough confidence that they can drop and prioritize. And now we're back on getting more projects. Hopefully that will go a little bit better this time around. The next thing that we have all heard about also is MVPs, right? I actually lived this off, and I think it's quite ironic that in this article, when Henrik, he actually encouraged people not to use the word MVP because it causes a lot of confusion. But I think people read it differently and interpret it differently. The one thing that we've picked up, I've had a lot of discussion with friends and colleagues when we look at this photo, this picture, and I'd ask you guys to do the same as well. It took me about 2-3 years, to ask the question, hey, there's something weird about this thing, right? a lot of times we tend to build things on top of each other. Can you guys resonate? Especially in software. You did something, you kind of build on top of it, and you build on top, and you build on top, right? You did a pilot, you kind of built something, you run, it was fairly successful, you came back, pilot was 100 people, now you want to scale up to 100,000 people. You kind of say, hey, can we just lift and drop this thing down? One thing we notice is you actually cannot morph number 2 into number 3. You get what I mean? You can't change the moped into a bike. What do you actually have to do? You actually have to throw it away. Right? And a bike into a motorbike. You can, I guess, if you really want to force it, you can morph a motorbike into a car. You put 2 motorbikes together and be a very challenging and interesting looking car. So my question to you is, when we talk about MVPs, do we throw away anything? I don't mean just throwing it away, You should have, especially in the early stages of MVP, low fidelity. Because you've got to be very clear on what you're testing. And one of the examples that I like the most out of Michael Siebel's YouTube is Airbnb. Their first versions of MVP. Have any of you guys seen this? So it's a very simple looking web page that's missing 2 things. It's missing map. So there's no map functionality for you to actually go and find where this place is. And it's missing payment. So you guys are thinking, okay, how do you pay then? It's just, yeah, you and me just meet each other and pay in cash. You know why? Because Airbnb was testing something new. The key thing that they needed to test was whether or not 2 strangers were willing to do business. You and I just met in this conference. Am I brave enough to open up my apartment for you to stay? Are you brave enough to come and stay in my apartment? That was the thing that they were testing. If this doesn't work, the payment doesn't matter. So every MVP should be testing for something simple, and then you move on. The more investment you do, the more difficult it's going to be for you to throw it away, right? So we've tried to put everything together. We sort of had a little culture, and I didn't realize we had this culture until about three weeks ago when I was talking to my team. And I told them, I said, hey guys, I'm thinking of getting an Apple Watch because I had a Garmin before. And their first question to me was, Jakkris, what problems are you trying to solve? And we had a very lengthy discussion where I was justifying to them. But this has become our culture, and we have kind of applied to everything that we do. So our office, we had a kind of grassy area. We bought a crappy version over there, and we bought like a smaller patch. That was our first version of MVP, just to kind of get a taste and feel what it looks like, what it feels like. Then we picked one over the other. And then if you come to our office area, we have a bigger patch now. The key thing is, at any one point, especially in the early stages, we were kind of like, yeah, we're just going to try this out, and we're ready to kind of throw it away, right? We did the same when we started introducing this beanbag in our office. The first version was a fluffy-looking thing, right? And we had another version. We tested it out, and then kind of, get some very good feedback before they started kind of reproducing, right? And you guys are thinking, okay, how are we doing this in the work? So we got contacted by our business line. They come to us and they say, hey, we need a digital queuing system, right? We need all these bells and whistles, connect online, queue replacement. This was what we gave them as the first version of MVPs. Say, hey, this is giving you a queue visibility. Let's test it out and see if you get what you think you wanted to get out of this. This is our second version, probably just a digitized version of that. So it's a culture of empowerment, a culture of building things cheaply and quickly. And I think that's kind of the 3 that we've got the 3 key things that I want to share with you. As we move on to the last slide, one of the things that I think people struggle with sometimes when you try to kind of use Agile and adopt yourself to the unpredictable world, one of the things that we've come to realize is, and I think if you're a drinker here, you'd probably recognize this as a tequila. If you have a goal of trying to make everybody happy, you're going to be sorely disappointed. It's not going to be possible. You can only make a lot of people happy. And I think the takeaways, just to summarize before we wrap this up, the world we live in now is unpredictable. If you can't come in terms with that, you're going to be very challenged to start adopting Agile. We will not be as fast as the good old predictable ways. Usain would not run 9.58 seconds. Right? Validate great ideas with all users, or real users, as Bia mentioned. And I think empowerment, focus, and minimalism. To close, I like to use an example because I think I like analogy, and my wife hates it. Every time I talk to her about it, she says, I don't like analogy at all. So I'm going to tell you this analogy that I think gives you a good idea. A tour is, I think, is a great example of what it means to be Agile. How many of you guys have been on package tour? Yeah? To me, that's kind of like a waterfall-ish, right? You pay money, you go, and, you expect that things will go as planned. What happens when something goes wrong? If you had diarrhea, if you had something sick or something like that, what happens? So my wife and I, we kind of call it laziness or call it Agile. We, instead of having package tour, we would say, hey, we're going for a week, time box. Our budget is so-and-so, $20,000 or whatever, 20,000 baht. And these are the top 40 things that we're going to do, right? Out of these top 40 things, the 20 are what we must do. And can you guess what happened? We go through the first place, we go to the second place. My wife said, hey, I love it here. I want to, spend the rest of my day here. What do? I said, yeah, sure, right? Never mind what happens to number 3 and number 4, which we thought we wanted to do. And this happens for the rest of the week. At the end of the trip, we don't get to do what we wanted to do, but we got what we are really happy about. The complexity with Agile comes in when you and I just met. We are going on this tour together. There's this thing called general interest, right? Where I said, oh, yesterday we went to a place that I wanted to go. Where do you want to go today? It may not be the place that I want to go to, but we are in it together. And this is when the complexity, this is when we have roles like Scrum Master and Product Owner to come and oversee this kind of general interest interactions. I think it gives a pretty good clarity of what it means to be Agile, and also the fact that you can't make everybody happy, right? The bigger the group, the more people you have, different focus, different challenges. But with that, I think this is kind of the end of the tour for us. Enjoy the rest of your Agile tour today. If you have any questions, find us during lunch and we can have a quick chat about it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for Kun Jakkris and Kun Weerawan. So let me wrap up a little bit because I think we can capture a lot of things. First of all, important thing is Agile is not fast, right? Agree? Yeah, it is about the flexibility, right? And Kun Weerawan also said about the design thinking. 80-20 rules, right? So I think we all here can capture a lot of information and knowledge from their experience. So do you have any question for our speaker? Raise your hand. Do you have any questions? Okay, so thank you very much for the speaker, Kun Jakkris and Kun Weerawan, to come here on the stage. Thank you.